Hi everyone, kAuction here with a short guide on the new features for the kAuction add-on, including the wishlist. To begin, just open the wishlist by typing /KA space wishlist and hit enter. You'll see the top left has a pull down for two different sections, the wishlists and the search feature. If I had any wishlists right now, they'd be showing up here, but since I do not, I'm going to go ahead and add a new one. I'll call it DPS and hit OK. And you can see my list is now here. If I select it, I don't have any items right now since I just added it. I'm going to go ahead and add a off-spec list as well. If I click on the plus sign, I'll get a pull down with some more information available for the lists. If I delete the list, that just does what it sounds like, deletes it. I'm going to add it back real quick. I can also rename it, so maybe DPS items. And then I can add an item manually. Adding an item manually is basically for when you know the ID and the name of an item, but you have not seen it drop, or you just know your local cache of items won't have it. So this is good for future zones or future bosses that just recently been released, and it's pretty unlikely that your server has had it drop or you've seen it. In this case, I'm just going to use the example given. So to add an item, type the exact item ID and then a colon or a semicolon to separate that between the actual item name. Make sure you use proper punctuation and capitalization and then hit add. Now if I go back, I now have an Arcanite Reaper. What you'll notice is hovering over it, it tells me that this can't be found in my local cache, so the details aren't available. The reason for that is that the item itself is not in my search results at the moment. So I don't get the tooltip, I don't get the level of the slot, things like that. However, any items that are added manually like this, they still will function with kAuction itself. So if an auction is created for an item that I added this way, even though my local cache may not have had the item beforehand, if it's in my wish list and the ID is correct, it will still function properly. So I'll be able to bid and all that. So anyway, that's the basics of the wish list. I'll show you more about that in a moment, but let's go to the search option here. So by default, search is empty. If I type /KA space UI, I pull up the kAuction options and go to wishlist. These are the settings that determine how search results are created. So the important thing to know about the search is it's fairly powerful. It will search every item known to your local cache. So most of the time it's going to be every item on the server that's been discovered. That's updated by basically being in the same zone as people, so that if the client had to draw the item for you or you were in range of that person, then it would put it in your cache. So anyway, I'll show you how it's generated. The minimum item level determines, just as it sounds, the minimum item level of the items to be included in your search. So by default it's set to 200. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 0 just to give you an example here. So that means no matter what the item level is, it will be returned. Next is rarity. Again, sounds just as it acts. This means that epic items or better, so epic, legendary, and heirloom, will return in my results. But for this example, I'm going to set it down to poor, so that means every item quality will be returned. Lastly, the results. I'll show you that in a minute. So with these set, I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh. You don't always have to hit refresh. If I close this window, I do /KA wishlist, open it back up, it acts as if I'd hit refresh. Basically, every time I open the search window, it generates an item database. You can see here there's tens of thousands of items. It looks through really quickly, takes a few seconds, and that generates the item index. So now I can search, my box is open there, and it will return results based on these settings. So basically almost every item that it found. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing something. I'm going to type letter I. And you can see as the results come up, you can see that what I typed in my query starts to highlight in my results. So if I type IC, I'm seeing apprentice, I see. Also, it's searched by mob, found ice howl. If I keep typing ice, it's going to find more things by ice howl, obviously. But you'll also notice the quality is varied. It's finding greens, grays, whites, all that stuff. So if I go back, I'm going to go ahead and change it back to the default, which is item level 200 and epic. And I'm also going to this results limit. If you look here, it says it's showing 50 results out of 19,000 total. So this 19,000 means that with our original settings of 0 and every quality, it detected 19,000 items that met that criteria, which is basically everything in my local cache. However, with 200 and epic, I'm going to set this to 10 as well and hit refresh. This will limit the results by quite a bit. It's going to take off all the greens and the blues and all the uncommons, and we'll just be looking at basically 200 eye level epic items or greater. And if I start typing a search again, now you can see we're just looking at epics. Also note that it says we're showing 10 results of 2,700. So now instead of 19,000 results, by searching for 200 in epic or greater, we only get 2,700. Of those 2,700, it's showing me the first 10 that match my criteria here. So if I keep typing ice howl, you can see my criteria changes. Instead of showing some winter solstice, Amos, things like that, it's now saying, well, I don't really have any items except dropped by ice howl. I could also search by zone. If I started typing trial, that would show up there, or Oldor. Oh, maybe I don't have any there. Oh yeah, there we go. So you kind of get the idea. By changing the results limit, that shows that number of results in your frame here. And be careful changing this number too high. The default is 50, but if you set it too high, then it's going to lag your client, probably to the point where it may even freeze. So be careful with that. So those are the basics of search. You can also sort your results. If you click on the headers, you'll see sort by name. That alphabetizes it. Click it again, it reverses. Same with mob. You can sort by mob name and zone. One thing to note is that not everything has mob and zone information. And this is because the mob and zone stuff is added manually by me. Since the game can't detect it automatically, that has to be added manually. So I'm trying to add Trial of the Crusader and Old War, and of course any future instances. Most of Trial of the Crusader is in there right now. But at any rate, if you can't search by the mob name, it's probably not in there. But it still will return items, so if you happen to find it from Wowhead and you know what it is, you can look here. And lastly, in list is simply if it's in one of your wish lists or not. So I'm going to go ahead and add this Acid Mob Boots. I just right click on it, and I can add it to either of my lists that exist. I'm going to add it to off spec, and now you'll see it's now marked yes as in list. If I right click again, I can also add it to DPS, or I can remove it from the off spec. So I'm going to add it to DPS items as well. And then I'm going to also add Betrayer of Humanity. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to add that to both. So now if I go back to my wish lists, I highlight one, now you can see my items that I've added. Like the search list, you can click on the column headers to sort by level, slot, name, and bid type. And so I'm going to show you what some of these options here in the wish list do. Let's close our configuration. So Let's look at this DPS items, Betrayer of Humanity.